Before I list the encounters I've witnessed, I believe it's necessary for one to understand me as a person and the circumstances leading to my employment with the Eternal Jubilee Church. I'm not a religious or spiritual person by any stretch of the imagination, nothing against it, but I've never felt compelled by it at all. As a person born and raised in the South, I was at a Baptist church for every service or event, no matter what, large or small. My family was very involved in the church. My grandfather was a deacon. My uncles on both sides were pastors for two unrelated churches, and my father helped out a lot with the youth group. Suffice to say, we put the Bible in the Bible Belt. I never resented this, and yet I felt nothing towards it. Even as a child, the songs felt hollow. I remember being jealous of my siblings and parents, for they could find happiness and solace in their faith. I found nothing, not even hatred. I wanted to believe, but I just couldn't. After graduating high school, I grew restless of my little town in the coming years. This dissatisfaction with life manifested itself through laziness and other unhealthy habits. Butting heads with my family more than ever over lifestyle choices, I finally cut contact and decided to never look back. I would learn to regret this, much to the dismay of my family, my significant other, and I decided to move to their tiny hometown in the mountains. Having similar upbringings, my partner's family was very involved in the local church as well. Down on our luck, his father begrudgingly helped me get a job as a custodian at their church, the Eternal Jubilee. However, fate had other plans for us. My partner was very eager to get home, and yet was so consumed by misery to actually be there. It started off somewhat minor, becoming kind of distant and eating less, but it snowballed quicker than I could have ever imagined. His emotions became increasingly erratic, with fits of explosive anger or quiet sulking. He was never an emotional man, so the sight of him weeping was completely foreign to me. I just didn't know how to approach these intense emotions, but they became a regular occurrence. There were some days he couldn't even look in my direction without crying. I would try to console him, only for him to become belligerently angry. He apologized to me frequently, but often over strange and vague reasons. But all the same, he would blame me for equally vague reasons, mere hours after an apology. He would habitually disappear, all hours of the night, supposedly to visit his family. Rigid and controlling, his parents would call daily, without fail. They'd stop by often as well, but would prefer to speak to him privately. They always seemed to be lurking around the corner, no matter the day. His parents would very rarely look in my general direction, let alone speak to me. Generally cordial to their son, they would turn ice cold when frustrated with him. I remember seeing him begin to cry in front of his father, only for the older man to push him to the ground as hard as he could. I tried to intervene, only for his father to walk away, not even acknowledging my existence. I can't even repeat the vile things my partner called me for, trying to stick up for him. This just wasn't him. It couldn't be. He would have never said those things to me before. After being coerced by his family, he joined a faith booster at their church and was there more often than not. I could not attend due to the special memberships his families had. I began to see him less and less, maybe once or twice a week. He wouldn't even look me in the eye anymore. Only living there for a month, he succumbed to the battle with his mental health and took his own life, only leaving behind a note, an excerpt of his poetry. A fly fell in love with a spider, throwing itself into its web. A trap, maybe, but one could see the spider had fallen in love with the fly. But instinct is stronger than love. Oh no. Forgive the spider for its hunger. But who was trapped? For the spider's heart was in the fly's trap all along. There is not a day that goes by where I don't miss him. I don't understand why or how it took such a drastic turn. I feel guilty for not understanding, for not saying the right thing, for not being able to stop it. I know his parents blame me for his death. After the service, They made it very clear they had no interest in keeping in contact. I had to keep moving, keep working, keep my head down until the pain goes away. I'm sorry, Wade. I thought my hometown was small. It makes this place look like a speck. If it were up to me, we would have moved to a city, somewhere with life, somewhere open-minded. But he wanted to come here, to the town that would eventually kill him. For as sparsely populated as the town was, there were many different churches in the area, many of them small and secluded, all dwarfed by the monolith that was the Eternal Jubilee Church. It was not on any digital maps, and actually finding the massive building was surprisingly difficult at first. A massive, peculiar structure. The Eternal Jubilee resembled many of the Baptist megachurches in theory, but its strange layout gave the impression of a building, mindlessly built larger and larger. A modern-day Tower of Babel. I know I keep emphasizing its size, and I might be exaggerating just a bit, but it was truly out of place to be in the middle of nowhere. Too grandiose for a backwater church, the top of its ever-tall steeple was tipped in a golden two-pronged implement, resembling a pitchfork. That's another thing. There wasn't a cross in sight within the building, at least in none of the rooms I've cleaned. I'm sure there's more. With the building being empty most days of the week, it is a very lonesome job other than the scattered staffing. The pay, surprisingly, was fantastic for what the basic duties were. We have a team of 6 custodians: Titus the bitter curmudgeon, Shifty Dale, Ditzy Pearl, Ignorant Ray Nathan, Quiet Barry, and the forgettable Tom or Tony. Not 100% sure of his name. He never wears his name tag for some reason. As well established, I'm not an adamant believer in the supernatural, but the isolation can get to you. Strange noises, odd shadows, figures out of the corner of your eye, rooms changing slightly in layout after leaving. These are very common things to hear on our lunch break. Much to the ire of Titus, a man who was almost as mean as he was old. Having seniority, he'd often bark orders at the team. He hated the supernatural babble, and hell, he almost punched Ray Nathan for saying, "Maybe the church is alive. I swear I hear breathing in the walls sometimes." He wasn't exactly wrong, though. The various classrooms, gymnasiums, and offices did all look very similar. It was easy to mistake them, but it did feel like rooms would shift ever so slightly, no matter what Titus or the pastor said. The pastor of the Eternal Jubilee was the eccentric Lysander Sinclair, a has-been rock star turned child of God. Pastor Lysander was an odd man, both in appearance and personality. Short and concerningly thin, the pastor engulfed his small frame in a tacky lavender and gold suit. Despite being ill-fitting, this affront to fashion was his lucky trademark, and he was seldom seen without it. They say he was beautiful once, before the debaucherous and drug-ridden lifestyle of a glam rocker left him aged and scarred. His features were ever so sharp. High hollow cheekbones and a finely pointed nose gave the little pastor an almost statuesque appearance. His lips were thin and scarred, always seeming to be curled into a faint smirk. There was something off about his eyes, bright green, feverish, and frantic. His stare always gave the impression that whatever he did back in the 70s still had lasting effects on his mind. The pastor's study was stranger still, a large office of many mirrors with a small golden calf resting upon his desk. Lysander always seemed uncomfortable when someone went near his study, for one reason or another. In truth, Lysander's band was never quite as popular as he let on, but it always seemed to come up in conversation. The Crazy Court of the Cobra King is the only Holy Harem song to really gain traction. It's catchy enough, I suppose. He is at the church more often than not, keeping mostly to himself in his study. However, he does have a tendency to haunt the halls and classrooms of the empty church, guided by his own reflection in the flooring and humming a long, forgotten song he probably wrote. You can tell when he talks to people He's focused on his own reflection in their eyes. Pastor Lysander always seemed to surround himself with attractive, young men and women. As disgusting as it sounds, his attention would focus on the physically beautiful. The prettier and more willing a person would be, the higher, within the church's hierarchy, they could rise from what I've observed. Very fickle. He'd seem to have a new favorite every other week, and would host personal revivals in his office after nightfall. Out of our staff, Lysander seemed particularly fond of me, and would always try to talk to me if given the chance. Maybe that's why I'd always be scheduled for the later shifts. The tall, muscular man with long curly hair always seemed like his main confidant. I can see a deep jealousy and hatred in his eyes. He deeply scares me. I hated being around Pastor Lysander. He just made me so uncomfortable. The almost whimsical, melodic way he spoke, his rough, uncanny androgyny, the unblinking, panicked stare that could strip any man down to his very core. For as strange as this man is, the people of this town are fiercely loyal to Pastor Lysander and the Eternal Jubilee Church. With how they talk about him, you'd think Lysander is their god. Interestingly enough, a lot of the members of the church are bizarrely wealthy. Suffice to say, both the pastor and the offering plate are spoiled by the populace. I was very skeptical at first. The stories that were told in the break room would get increasingly bizarre. Horned shadows, beautiful women with gold coins for eyes appearing in mirrors, passing rooms with young men, dancing naked only for them to disappear without a trace, hoof marks on carpet, etc. Other than Barry randomly finding a golden coin in his pocket, nothing unnatural has happened in several weeks. Until near the end of one of my many shifts, I had come across the petrified Pearl stuttering out incoherent ramblings. Trying my best to calm her down, I could only decipher bits and pieces of what she was struggling to say. Something pale and horned had run past her, slamming its way to the stairwell of the boiler room below. Now the boiler room was in the lowest part of the basement, and the top of the door frame is too high for most people to reach. However, I could plainly see two massive hand prints stained in something that shimmered like liquid gold above the door frame. Upon closer examination, the basement was entirely empty, other than a golden lock of a woman's hair and a single coin, strangely bearing the visage of a bull's head. You saw the one with horns. I've been seeing its shadow for the past month. Dale spat, overall unfazed by the tale. Dale had been working with the church longer than anyone, save for Titus, a cold, grizzled man. No one really knew where Dale was from or what he did prior to getting the job as a janitor. What was known about Dale Ortega was he's an agnostic and has seen a lot of shit in his day, which is an odd way of wording it since he's 24. A former drifter and self-described survivor, I think it's wise not to cross Dale. Pearl, the cheerful woman who never had anything but a smile, didn't speak another word before clocking out early with a face hardened by fear. She didn't come back, obviously. I heard she died in a car accident recently. Damn shame. Ray Nathan, ever the instigator, slammed the coins on Lysander's desk. Lysander, being a man of many nervous habits, began to fiddle with his fortune of gold rings compulsively. What curious little tokens, friend, but offerings are put in the tithe box. Pastor Lysander cooed in his typical, relaxed stupor. What are they? Ray Nathan grimaced, leaning down closer to Lysander. He was a large man, thick of arm and thicker of mind, tall, powerful, and imposing. Ray Nathan was a mule of a man and absolutely dwarfed the most likely malnourished pastor. Lysander gently ran his long, skinny fingers against the bull's head emblazoned on the coin. You bring before me, man. This is mankind, our very nature wrought into being, the reflection of our soul. Lysander's vague, vapid answer was interrupted by Ray Nathan's agitated snort. Save the riddles, Pastor. I want to know what the hell these are and what the hell is wrong with this place. I have put up with enough. You've heard the stories, down to the last detail. You've never attended one of our services, Mr. Raymond. I'm sure a sermon would enlighten you. I was born Baptist, I'll die Baptist. Not whatever the hell you are. Ray Nathan's outburst and uncontrollable anger was quickly halted by the pastor's eyes. For the first time since the 70s, Lysander Sinclair looked focused and alert. His horrible green eyes, like a viper's gaze, cleaved right through the big man's bravado. I am a prophet of the true God. A brute, an assailant, such as yourself, would not understand. Do not forget your place, friend, the pastor hissed. I assure you, this is a house of God. The only thing wrong is those who doubt the word. Now, tell me, whose head is on this coin, and whose inscription is stamped on it? Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, Raymond, the pastor said harshly, as he stuck the coins in his pocket. I must bid you a good day, for I am a very busy man. Lest we forget, who else would hire you with that record of yours? Feel free to take the rest of the day off. I expect a calmer disposition for your next shift. Is that understood? And for the first time, probably, in his life, Raymond Nathan Morrigan felt small. The big man nodded in defeat. It was over. Ray Nathan went into the pastor's office as a defiant, confused man, and left it a whipped dog. He was never quite the same after the confrontation, not nearly as loud or brazen. He just kept his head down and worked like the rest of us. I surely thought he'd quit. Haunting the halls of the eternal Jubilee, like a somber ghost of his past self. Maybe he saw something deep within the pastor's eyes, a danger hiding beneath the glossy-eyed stupor. The place just felt so wrong and yet so alluring. I would catch myself thinking about it on my days off. Anything to fill my mind in that empty house. Up to that point, I hadn't experienced anything too out of the ordinary. I'd hear a strange noise from time to time, or some of my supplies would suddenly go missing, but nothing too egregious. That would unfortunately come to an end. One night, I was cleaning up the gymnasium from one of the many damned youth activities that absolutely trashed the place. Alone, of course. Everything was fine, until a cloying musk began to choke the entirety of the gym. At first it was merely a sweet and floral scent, yet it thickened into a noxious stench of perfume and scented oils. Out of the blue, I was struck by an uneasiness I have yet to experience again. Something was off, very off. It was like I was sensing something foreign to this world, something not meant to be here. It's a hard feeling to describe, almost like you found out the world was about to explode. Such panic and awe, both amazement and terror as one. An unknown shape materialized off in the distance, causing my body to tingle with a bizarrely pleasant sensation. I tried to speak, but to no avail, as my mouth was consumed by the vulgar taste of metal and an unfamiliar sweetness. Very clearly in my peripheral vision, a pale naked figure was atop the stage. Too tall to be a normal person with both male and female traits, it bore golden eyes and no noticeable genitalia. Innumerable piercings and chains of gold dotted its body in a sickening shimmer. Whatever this thing was, I tried to pretend like I didn't notice it. Maybe it will disappear, like all the stories I hear from Dale and Ray Nathan. It just stood there, staring with its coin-filled sockets. It was repulsive, but also beautiful. I was filled with an unreasonably powerful urge to stare right at it. It took every ounce of concentration to not look at the golden hermaphrodite. Bear witness. And for the most agonizing seconds of my life, I swore I could hear Wade's voice beckoning me. I needed to look, but just like that, it was gone without a trace. Immediately being hit by intense nausea, I ran to the closest bathroom as my dinner came roiling up. Unfortunately, I wasn't quick enough, retching all over a pristinely cleaned sink. Amidst the acid and bile, the sweet purple froth of wine began to seep through my mouth. I haven't touched wine in months, and yet here I was spewing up an entire bottle. Just when I thought my system was entirely expunged, something violently erupted from my throat. I couldn't believe it. It was a coin. God help us. I just threw up a golden coin. Completely and utterly clean of any bile, the coin was engraved with two lovers locked in a passionate embrace. The voice in my head screamed to run and never look back. Leave this damn town and all these backwater hicks behind. I need to go somewhere lively and normal, somewhere nice, a place he would still be alive in. But then another voice slithered into my head, smooth and silken. I needed to stay. He wanted to be here, didn't he? Like cloying perfume, 1,000 thoughts of doubt clouded my mind. Isolation is getting to you. Are you going to go crawling back home? Are you going to prove Mom and Dad right? You're going crazy. You can't leave. You couldn't afford it. They got you this job. You not only kill their son, but also spit on their kindness. You are a sinner. He would miss you. The church would miss you.